Well, it's funny because obviously this show and like within this universe, it's pretty common for like siblings or cousins and stuff to be together, but we draw the line at mother son or like father daughter. We're like,
Yeah,
that's not that
much.
far.
You're like, that's kissing cousins we're down with. Okay, we can get behind that, but anything past that, that's too weird.
This is cut it off.
We all have to have our line in the sand, and this is ours. Okay, mother and sons, it's a no for us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who love to explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are covering House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5. I have to say, after coming off such a stressful episode with dragon battles and death, this one felt a little bit slow. It was still interesting, obviously, and very intriguing to see where everybody goes and how they've worked through the aftermath of Rook's Rest.
See, I didn't think it was slow. I thought the episode before leading up to Rook's Rest was slow, but I was in it. I mean, obviously there's no battle or anything, but I felt like they really kept it moving. I was like, wait, what's happening? Oh my gosh, wait, what? Like I was just looking everywhere like, wait, what are they doing? Who's that?
They did move around a lot, like between places and characters. So that was interesting, but maybe it just didn't feel as crazy.
I feel like the most commonly asked question during every single episode and for every person in America is, wait, who is that again?
Who are they?
Wait, what?
Where are they going? Yeah. Oh my gosh, for real. Before we get started today, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast. We will have explicit conversations. Explicit language may be used and triggering events may be discussed, so please adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. We are continuing our new reader deep dives into the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. We just started The Assassin's Blade now after covering Throne of Glass and Crown of the Night. So if you are looking for a fantasy series to start, then so far we can't recommend the book series enough. Also, if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe. This way you'll always be up to date when new episodes drop. That is all for housekeeping. This is what you can expect from today's House of the Dragon episode. First, we will start with the State of the Realm, where we recap key events. Next, we will hold a meeting with the Small Council to analyze key events and conversations. After that, we will continue with our trial in the Fantasy Court of Law to decide which team has enough evidence to support their claim to the Iron Throne. And last but not least, we will also share our favorite moments from the episode. And without further ado, Addison, please update us with the State of the Realm for our episode summary.
We open this episode with everyone from Team Black still reeling over the loss of Rhaenys and Meleys. It turns out that things aren't going much better for Team Green either. Cole makes a huge miscalculation when he parades the traitor dragon Meleys' head through the streets. Instead of celebrating in victory, the people of King's Landing are stunned and see it as an ill omen. They finally arrive at the castle and bring in Aegon's battered body. In a gruesome scene, the Macers literally pry off Aegon's armor from his melted flesh. Apologies for the graphic description. Back in Dragonstone, Rhaenyra's small council is in an uproar, especially Sir Alfred. Rhaenyra tires of the constant arguing and even goes so far as to ask Sir Alfred if he takes issue with her. Of course he doesn't, just the fact that she's a woman. Baela catches Jace sneaking out to make his way to Harrenhal to deal with Daemon. During their conversation, Jace instead realizes he must treat with the Freys and bargain for passage for Craigstark's Greybeards across the Twins, so they can intercept the Lannisters before they make their way to the Riverlands. Meanwhile, neither Daemon in Harrenhal or Rhaena in the Vale with Lady Jane Eyre are doing much better in their attempts to rally an army, as both struggle to persuade the people around them. While Rhaenyra rages to Masari about her inability to take action. Later on, Baela and Rhaenyra reminisce on what an absolute fucking treasure Rhaenys was, and she gives Baela a small box of unknown contents to pass along to Corlys. In a very steamy scene, we see Daemon getting it on with an unknown woman who we can only assume is a Targaryen based on her silver blonde hair. As they make love, she whispers all the things Daemon has always wanted to hear. Record scratch, that's his mother? What the fuck? In another what the fuck moment, at least for Alicent, but not for us, she is passed over for Regent and she seems shocked by this. Surprise, surprise. I guess she forgot she was a woman. Aemond is, of course, delighted and begins giving commands. Oh, and someone cut down the fucking rat catchers. Alicent confronts Cole and the two leave things unresolved, while the people of King's Landing, including Hugh and his family, try to flee. Meanwhile, Jace treats with the Freys and manages to secure not only passage, but their bent knees in exchange for Harrenhal. Daemon has yet another weird conversation with our local barn owl trapped in a human's body, Alice, and in an absolutely inspired speech, Baela convinces Corlys to at least consider becoming Rhaenyra's hand. Seems like everyone's going on a mission now. Alfred gets sent to Harrenhal to ask Daemon if he just can't read and write, or if all the ravens have fucking died. The River Lords come to tell Daemon in the middle of the night for no fucking reason to fuck off, and Alinda, Rhaenyra's faithful lady's maid, goes to King's Landing on White Worm business. In the final scene, Jace and Rhaenyra have a lengthy discussion on what to do about Vhagar and come up with a radical idea that might be just crazy enough to work, but only time will tell. And by that I mean only a few more days until the next episode is released.
Oh, that last part got me pumped. I was like, yes,
Really?
if it's successful, yeah, if they can find more dragon riders, I was like, that's so cool.
Oh, I'm not pumped. I think it's a terrible fucking idea.
Why?
Remind me when we get there.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a bad fucking idea. I mean, from the perspective of will it work and possibly help them defeat Vhagar? Yes. But long term, for the stability of House Targaryen, it's a bad fucking idea.
Yeah, I guess that remains to be seen, but
I really took the wind out of your sails. You were like, yeah, oh yeah, you're right. Fuck.
I mean, maybe. I guess the whole question of dissent and everything in the future, it does raise the potential for people to challenge them if they figure out they have Valyrian descent of some sort. And I'm sure there's plenty of bastard children from people along the way throughout the years.
Plenty.
So I guess we'll have to see how they spin it. But anyways, thank you for those episode summaries. Let's move on to our analysis.
All right, to the small council we go. And before we get started on discussing the actual events of the episode, we of course have to talk about the tapestry progression and the title. So, as far as I could tell, there was no change in the tapestry progression. Originally, I thought it would be this week, but then I started thinking about the blood and cheese episode. And that first episode, Jaehaerys gets killed at the end, right? And so you expect to see a big change, but there wasn't. And the next episode, the rat catchers are hanged, and the tapestry isn't changed in that episode either. It's the one after that the tapestry gets updated with Jaehaerys and the rat catchers. And so my suspicion is that there were unresolved things like Aegon's fate, for example, in this episode that would determine the progression of the tapestry. And so they didn't update it for this episode because there were still things we needed to be revealed to us as the audience in this episode. So now I'm thinking the tapestry is going to be updated next week with the Battle of Rook's Rest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was a little surprised that they didn't put Rhaenys and Meleys in there, though, because they're dead for sure. But I suppose that still kind of ties into Rook's Rest. So if the aftermath of Rook's Rest is still unresolved, then maybe that makes sense for why they haven't done anything with it yet.
I think it literally depends on what image they're going to show in the tapestry. If it's kind of a whole zoomed out view of like the battle and then Aegon's body being carried in, they may not be able to show it because we didn't know what was going to happen with Aegon and Sunfire. And maybe it starts with them like carting Maelyse's head through the streets of King's Landing because that's pretty impactful. But I don't know. So I'm definitely very interested to see how they do it. And I mean, if they do it, I would think they would. But I mean, I don't know. Next, we move to the episode title. The title of this episode is Regent. I said it last week, but now it is officially confirmed. When I checked the episode title on Sunday night, it just said episode 5. There was no title. And I feel this is absolutely intentional, so nothing is spoiled. I think there has been some feedback because a lot of people have read the books, which good for them. The title of the episode is pretty indicative of what's going to happen or makes the events more predictable. And so I think this is a way for the showrunners to create a little bit of mystery surrounding the episode and also prevent book readers from spoiling it from show watchers with the episode title. So I actually appreciate that. That's my impression. So
that makes sense.
I'm not sad about it, to be honest. It's okay. I'm actually not sure when they post the episode title, but I was able to see it yesterday. So the title of this episode is Regent, which, if you don't know, I looked it up for you. The definition of regent is a person appointed to administer a country because the monarch is a minor or is absent or incapacitated. This one's pretty on the nose. Aegon is clearly incapacitated and likely will be for some time. It's also possible that he will die, so he's not able to rule in any meaningful capacity. So a regent is needed to rule in his stead. As we'll talk about in that small council scene, Aemond is selected as the regent to rule in Aegon's stead. And that's pretty much it. I think this episode really focuses on Aemond's path, and we'll talk about it as we continue on.
Definitely. So to get started with the events of the episode, we start off in Driftmark. We just have a very brief scene. Corlys is walking to his throne, and you can see that he is just absolutely devastated from the loss of Rhaenys, his wife, and the Queen of Driftmark, in a way. I don't know what the official title would be, but...
Yeah, I don't know. But you want to hear something so sad about that scene? I was watching the House That Dragons Build, the behind-the-scenes documentary about the making of each episode, and they break the episode into sections where they discuss different elements from the show. They discussed the scene specifically, and you know what they titled it? The Hall of None. And I was like, oh my God, that's so sad. I was like, that's devastating. Because then you see him walk up and he's all alone because everyone's gone. He only has Baela and Rhaena left, and Rhaena is, in the Vale. And I was like, oh, that's really fucking sad.
That's like low-key kind of fucked up, but...
From the House of Nine to the House of None.
Oh. Okay. Anyways, well, directly after this, we have another devastating scene where we just see Rhaenyra. She's overlooking the sea, and she is also crying as well. So I think those scenes were obviously heavily intended to display how much Rhaenys' death impacted everybody. And then after that, we cut to King's Landing. So we briefly see common people. They're outside lining up for food, and it's very clear there is a famine now within the city, and the people are struggling with the blockade and the ongoing war. Then shortly after this, a procession arrives, and they're winding through town, and it shows Meleys's head, and the guards are shouting, "The traitor dragon Meleys, slain at Rook's Rest by your king, Aegon." The expectation from the guards and Kristen Cole and everything is that, people are going to celebrate. They're going to be very excited by this. But that is not what happens at all. Instead, you hear people mumbling in the background, "Mark my words, this is a black omen. 'Tis an abomination. Rhaenyra will answer this." And the people are just very clearly upset. They're very solemn. They're not taking this news very well. And Kristen turns and says to Gwaine, "Don't they realize we won the battle?" And Gwaine says, "Strange victory if it was won." So obviously, Kristen and Gwaine, they were anticipating cheering and glory for themselves, but all they got was grim shock.
Yeah, there's specifically a part of that sequence where one of the small folk comes up and he says, "I thought the dragons was gods." And I think that's very indicative of the tone of that scene. You have to remember that nobody's seen a dead dragon in decades. Probably not in anyone that's currently alive in their lifetime, because I looked it up, but now I forgot. So bad for me for not writing it down. But the last time that dragons battled was a while ago. And even in a dragon battle, probably not everyone saw a dead dragon. So when you think about this universe, they don't have running water. They don't have electricity. There are no modern day miracles. So dragons are probably the closest things to gods, right? They can fly, they're all
Yes.
powerful, they have extended lifespans. And so seeing one killed, I would imagine is really upsetting because they're the closest thing to the gods they worship. So to see one beheaded is probably really upsetting. I have to say, I love that Cole had to eat shit on this because he thought he was like, yeah, look at this. And they were like, no, no.
I know. He had like a small glimmer of honor leading the battle in Rook's Rest. That was taken away when he's like, oh shit, dragons are coming. He tries to make a political move, doesn't end well, no honor for him. It's just struck down yet again. But I agree that it's not great because, as you said, dragons and even Targaryens are viewed as
anointed. They're anointed.
God. Yes, just they're highly viewed and they hold a lot of power because of their ability to have dragons, but to be able to see them be killed really does shatter the small folks' worldview because they're like, oh shit, these creatures and beings that we thought were gods are dead now. So they can die. I think the implications of that further down the line are interesting. But also, when that one man says, I thought the dragons were gods, Hugh comes up next to him and he just says, it's just meat. And I feel like that is also very indicative of the fact that the people are kind of just don't care right now, right? They're starving, they're hungry. They're just like, I don't give a shit about politics right now. We're all starving. We're struggling.
Yeah.
This doesn't matter that much, right? After that, we see Alicent and Aemond. They've been watching the procession from above. And as a carriage walks by, it has like a crate. And I think that's the same one that has the sword that they pull out later. But it's carrying something important in there. And
the crate,
Alicent,
isn't that the crate that has Aegon's body in it?
Oh, is it Aegon's body?
Yeah.
Oh, I felt like that was a little bit weird.
Well, they don't want anyone to know how bad he looks. That's why.
Okay, I didn't realize. I thought it was just kind of weird because that's the king. So you're just going to put him in a wooden crate. That's why I thought it was just the sword. But I also was like, why would you carry just a sword in a huge box like that? I don't know. But
no, that's definitely Aegon's body. There's just not a good way to transport him, keep him protected from the elements and from view. So,
okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But anyways, Alicent is watching from above and she looks very grim. Then she looks over at Aemond and notices the extra dagger that he now has. After that, she hurries off. And I feel like this is when she first became suspicious of Aemond and what happened at Rook's Rest. So obviously she spends the next couple scenes like investigating and trying to figure out what happened. And then the procession ends up bringing this crate up into the castle. And then we are now in Aegon's room. In the next scene, we see Aegon being cared for by the maesters. Alicent asks if he's alive, and Maester Orwell says his grace remains with us for the moment. This is when they start peeling off Aegon's armor, which is just stuck to him because of his burned skin, which is gross. And like the sounds from that again,
well, and then when they all start to gag, because you have to imagine it probably smells horrific. And obviously we can't smell it, but I was like, it kind of gave you like a little bit of a nauseated feeling just
Again, I am surprised that Aegon has survived this. I mean, granted, it's a fictional show. They're going to keep him alive if they want to for the time being. But like, I mean, I don't know how long it took to get to Rook's Rest, but I would imagine that it's
at least a couple days.
Yeah, at least a few days. And for you to be sitting just in your armor with festering wounds, like that's like a pool for infection and stuff like that. And
it's like, he obviously is not eating anything. Were they giving him water? Because he would have died in a couple days of dehydration. So,
yeah. Anyways, a minor thing that I'm going to ignore, but
yeah. Ignore so you can enjoy the plot.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But Alicent stares in horror, and after asking if he will die, Orwell dismisses himself, stating the next few hours are most critical, and he goes back to caring for Aegon.
Did you notice that the Silent Sisters are just standing there waiting?
No, I didn't notice that.
It's just a quick shot, but you see two of them in their very distinct garments. And I thought that was a nice touch, right? Because his life really is so far in the balance. And I imagine that's to be pretty ominous to just see the Silent Sisters standing there waiting to know if they need to take your body and prepare it for burial. So I was like, oh shit.
I would imagine his condition is, I mean, he's hanging on by a thread at this point. So, but after this, Aemond walks in and, he just like strolls in, spreads out his arms. He just like leans over. And I'm like, you do not look like somebody who's very upset about the state of your brother. But he just says, someone will have to rule in his stead. And then Alicent, of course, is like, what the fuck? And she like looks over at him. I feel like she's definitely shocked, but she's also kind of scared. I think she's like, what did you do? And I think she feels horrified that Aemond, again, doesn't seem that disturbed by Aegon's state and his lack of empathy, honestly, in this situation. The dude is literally standing there like, okay, what's next? No emotion. It's almost maybe a little bit satisfaction, maybe, to see Aegon down and him now having an opportunity to take over, right?
Yeah, it's a very interesting reaction when you're literally staring at the charred, mangled corpse of your brother. It's not like, oh, he took a sword wound, half of his skin is charred off, and you're just like, yep, someone's gonna have to rule in his stead, and it's gonna be me, baby.
He's like an extra crispy, not even extra crispy. He is a toasted,
melted.
like, like a toasted chicken, like just absolutely burned up.
You can't say that. That's a human being. What's wrong with you? This is kind of off topic. Have you seen the behind the scenes photos of Aegon in all of his makeup? He's standing there with like the peace sign, like drinking a coffee. It's so funny.
I had listened, sorry, again for the side note, but I listened to the official House of Dragon podcast, right? And they had been talking to the director of this episode, and they were talking about how he had to sit in that hair and makeup for like 5 hours. Like he's just chilling. And then during that entire scene, he can't move or anything because it would like mess up all of his stuff. But I cannot imagine being covered in all of that stuff and then just having to sit there.
And he probably had to do it multiple days in a row because he probably didn't do it in one single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, we digress. But after that scene, Alicent then makes a stop at Criston Cole's room. Cole is cleaning off his sword. And first off, the townspeople get moldy fruit and veggies, and you're cleaning your sword with a crispy, ripe lemon? Excuse me?
I didn't even notice that. You're so right. What the fuck?
It's added to emphasize the fact that everybody else is struggling, but not in the castle. Alicent goes on to ask what happened, and Criston simply says, we took the castle. He's avoiding eye contact. He seems very like, I'm not going to give you the answer that you want, right? And Alicent tries to clarify, stating what befell him, referring to Aegon. And Criston says, the king fought valiantly. Alicent says, and Aemond, what was his part in this? And Criston shelters Aemond from any kind of speculation, just says, I cannot say. And it seems pretty obvious that he's hiding the truth for now. Whether that's because him and Aemond have previously discussed this, or if it's because Criston really doesn't know what to do, I think remains to be seen. I kind of feel like Criston's a little scared too, because if we remember that final scene, Criston walks up on Aemond, who was sheathing a sword, but Aemond's not running up to Aegon, like trying to care for him or anything. He's just staring at him and then he walks off, right? And so I would imagine that Criston also was like, what the hell were you about to do?
Well, not that I want to defend Criston Cole ever, but it's also possible he actually doesn't know. We don't know what his vantage point was. Even if he's standing in the perfect position to view what's going on, those dragons are hundreds of feet in the air, right? And it probably all happened so fast and the stress of battle. He may not actually really know the exact sequence of how things occurred.
Yeah.
How Aegon got burned. Meleys and Sunfire did have a pretty good little tussle. Obviously, we as viewers are privy to a much more up close, organized viewing than Kristen is. And so it's possible he really doesn't know.
This is true too. Again, I don't want to give Kristen Cole too much grace.
Not too much.
Yeah. But if anything, it's very clear that Alicent is suspicious of the circumstances. And I think, again, this is also the moment for her in her relationship with Cole where she's beginning to realize that she can't trust Cole either, as we see in the rest of the episode.
I also thought it was interesting in that scene, we sort of learn of Sunfire's fate, but not really. All he says is that they left Sunfire behind because he was long in the dying, which was an odd phrase. I'm assuming that means he was dying very slowly and they just couldn't sit around and wait for him to die, which is kind of fucked up. But then again, I don't really know how they can move a temperamental hurting dragon. So they probably didn't really have any choice. And I mean, I guess either the dragon's going to die or he's going to heal and he can fend for himself. I don't know, but I'm really disappointed. I like Sunfire. I want to know what Sunfire's fate is going to be, because until I see a body or someone says, yes, Sunfire has died, baby's still in play. So
yeah, that's true.
Maybe he'll make it. I don't know. Honestly, I don't think we're going to see Sunfire again this season.
I don't think so either. I mean, didn't he get like his wing ripped off basically by
I think in the books he does, but in the show it's unclear the extent of his injuries. The only thing we really see is a really good shot of him taking a claw to the chest, and then obviously we took quite a bit of fire. So the scope of his injuries are unclear.
Oh, Sunfire.
Baby Sunfire.
Oh, so sad. But after the scenes in King's Landing, we are now at Dragonstone, and Rhaenyra is meeting with her council. Sir Alfred continues being very disrespectful, per usual, pointing out that they've lost castles to Cole, and they can really only hope to get an army from Daemon, who fled after a, quote, marital spat. Rhaenyra questions his loyalty, and Alfred says, I could never doubt your capability or your quickness of mind. It is merely the gentler sex heretofore has not been much privy to the strategies of battle or their execution. Rhaenyra rightfully claps back and says, there's been peace in our lifetime. You've seen no more battles than I have. And I was like, damn right. You tell him.
Yes,
Alfred's well on his way to getting flushed if he doesn't get in line.
I mean, it's not necessarily Rhaenyra's fault, but she has not been trained in battle strategy.
True.
So Alfred's not wrong. It's fucked up, but she really doesn't have any specific education in battle strategy or anything like that. But also Rhaenyra is absolutely correct. There's been no fucking battles in Sir Alfred's lifetime. So what the fuck does he know?
Yeah, I mean, until you actually have partaken in a war, you don't have any real world experience, right? All of this is just theory and speculation for like strategy. Anyways, Rhaenyra sits and then commands to send ravens to Maidenpool and Crackclaw Point to ready themselves and supply them with weapons if needed. Immediately, her council devolves right back into bickering as they demand a counterattack for Rook's Rest, noting with Aegon's status precarious and Vhagar tired, it would be the perfect time to strike King's Landing. Rhaenyra again offers herself to go fly out there, but her council argues against her because obviously she's their queen and she cannot be risking her life like that. Rhaenyra is very frustrated by this. She really wants to go do something, but she feels very restrained. And so she replies, then what would you have me do? And this scene demonstrates that the Blacks are clearly struggling to figure out what to do. I think the loss of Rhaenys and the absence of Daemon is really taking its toll. As Rhaenyra stated, none of them really have any real war experience, directly speaking. But I do feel like, as we see in the rest of the episode, it felt like this is when she finally takes the reins and begins acting with more conviction as queen. I think she's kind of come to terms with the reality of her situation in terms of not really knowing what the fuck Daemon's been doing and knowing that she has to do something. And instead of waiting for somebody else to advise her or counsel her, ultimately, she has to be the one to start making direct calls and ordering and commanding the people around her.
Yeah. I think in that scene with Visaria right after this, where she's talking and she says, the path I'm on has never been trod, I think she realizes that she's a trailblazer, right? No one has ever been in this position before. And it's really up to her to set the tone for history. And I think when she finally has that realization that she can make the rules because she's the first one, I think it gives her this freedom to just start making decisions. And she's like, well, I'm the queen, so we're going to do what I fucking want now. And so I think in a way that's actually good. She has that realization. There's no right or wrong way to do it because no one's ever done it before. So you can't try to make decisions on what's right or wrong because there kind of is no right or wrong.
Yeah, there's no example to follow. So
exactly.
Next, we see Bela. She's in her room studying, and Jace walks in. He's got his model face. He's striding with this cape on. It's like billowing behind him. He definitely looks like he's on a mission. He's up to something. And Bela asks him where he's going, and Jace says to Harrenhal to treat with Daemon. Rhaenys has fallen. He must affirm his loyalty to my mother and report his standing. Bela questions his plan, and Jace reveals he basically feels useless and kind of humiliated having to stay back and out of the fight, even though he really wants to be involved. Bela says, she only protects you. You are the succession. And then Jace responds, then I must be seen to act for her claim and mine. This is when he suddenly thinks of, I have to say, a pretty good plan. He decides if he can get the Freys to ally with them, then this will allow Cregan Stark's army a clear path to the Riverlands since the Freys control the crossing at the Twins, and they wouldn't have to wait for Daemon's gathered forces. Bela states she will not like it, and Jace responds, then don't tell her, not until I'm away. I will say, I had a feeling that Jace was going to go do something. He was itching.
Yeah, you totally
He's been itching for like the past 2 episodes to make a move of some sort. I do really respect Jace for wanting to do something to help Rhaenyra's cause. I think it's funny that he himself is even like, I'm gonna go make sure my uncle does right by my mom because he knows Rhaenyra doesn't feel confident in Daemon's loyalty right now.
Yeah.
But also simultaneously, I was like, Jace, are you sure about that? Like, why are you going by yourself? It does make you nervous. And he's lucky that nothing bad happened to him because it easily could have, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking that when I watched that scene. I was like, Lorraine totally called that last episode that Jace is tired of sitting around like a little princeling.
Yeah. So after this, we are now in the Riverlands. Daemon and Caraxes are threatening the Brackens with Willem Blackwood next to him. And Daemon says, our terms are simple, Lord Bracken. Renounce the false King Aegon as a usurper and bend the knee to me or your house burns. Of course, it's very interesting that Daemon says to me and not Rhaenyra. It's like, Daemon, tread carefully. But the Bracken responds, I would sooner be Lord of Bones and Cinders than bend the knee before some heathen Blackwood, C-word, and his hired dragon. Willem urges Daemon to burn them, which I think was funny. And honestly, when you reflect on how everything else unfolds after that, he was kind of right. He should have just burned Lord Bracken. But of course, at this time, you really do think he's going to burn him because they pan over to the scene. Caraxes is behind him with his mouth open.
Yes.
Lord Bracken's just standing there with his back to him. And you're like, all right, he's about to get flamed because Bracken also chooses to get flamed. He's like, go ahead, flame me then, right? But then we transition scenes and Willem and Daemon are just chilling. Like Daemon's sitting on a rock, Daemon says, I did not think they'd be so eager to die. And Willem says, you should have obliged them. Daemon responds, I came here to raise swords, not corpses, which is true. And I will say it was a very restrained decision on Daemon's part. He chose not to be so impulsive about what he was going to do. Yeah. But this does backfire. I think Willem is definitely pissed and he calls the Brackens pig-headed, intransigent, which I looked that up, means unwilling or refusing to change one's mind about something. And then Daemon says they would rather burn than succumb. Exactly the kind of men I need. This is kind of when you see Daemon's wheels are spinning. We can tell he's about to hatch some kind of plan. And he says, perhaps you could try less fighting and more persuading. Willem says they are unyielding in battle, but every man has a weakness. And Daemon's like, look, I can't do anything, but go ahead, have at it. And Willem says, I'm your servant, your grace, and walks off to his men. As we see how this all unfolds with the Blackwoods and the Brackens, it's pretty clear that yet again, Daemon gives some vague orders. He lets out a little too much line on the leash, which creates a blood and cheese 2.0 situation when we find out that all the Blackwoods just committed war crimes against innocent Bracken folks.
Yes, I think this scene is kind of interesting because, as you said, Daemon shows a lot of restraint, which is surprising for him. But I think ultimately his analysis that I need an army of men, and if they refuse, I can't afford to just kill them all. But I think there's a little bit of respect that Daemon has, which he kind of mentions later. They would rather be burned than submit. And those are really the kind of men he needs in a battle against the Greens. And so I think there's a little bit of respect there for Daemon. And that's why he chooses not to roast him. I also like in the opening of that scene where he says, the hour is late and my dragon is hungry. You have no choice but to submit.
That's true. It's like, it's time to eat. Let's get this over with.
It's so funny. There's like the cut to him sitting on the rock and he's like, well, fuck it. I thought they would not be so eager to die.
He's like, I thought they'd be cowering to me, but that was not how it panned out. But then again, I am like, okay, if they're so staunchly set in their loyalty to the Greens at this point, because that's who they declared for, do you really think that they were going to change their mind all of a sudden, though? Because now all the River Lords are pissed at Daemon for allowing this to happen. And the Blackwoods flew under the Targaryen banner. And so I don't think Daemon anticipated that it was going to go this far, like how everything happened, because he does seem kind of surprised by that. But regardless, he's the one taking the blame. And now he's losing faith from the rest of the River Lords because of this event. And even they themselves were like, you could have just flamed the Lord Bracken and it would have been fine. But now that you've terrorized innocent people, this is where we put our foot down. And who knows if they're going to follow him here on out.
Honestly, I think that Daemon was under the impression that while they're such staunch supporters of Team Green, in the face of a dragon, pretty much anybody would flip-flop and be like, yes, you know what? I see the error of my ways. Because you have to remember, again, people don't really see dragons very often. If they do, they see them way in the distance in the sky. So actually being face-to-face with a dragon is fucking terrifying. So I think he thought that would be much more persuasive than it was. And I got to hand it to the Brackens. I fucking respect them. Okay, I don't
that's true.
Like, they stick to their guns, and I appreciate that because, as we discussed in the previous episode, I would have been like, "Oh my god, yes, sure." Yeah. If Cole's there, I'm Team Green. If Damon's there, I'm Team Black. If they're both there, I'm leaving. You know?
Yeah.
You're not gonna catch me going to the sword for my loyalties. Okay.
yeah, that's so true. Oh my god. Okay. After this, we cut back to Rhaenyra now. So we're finally seeing a little bit of what she's been up to. She's speaking with Lady Jane Eyre, and Lady Jane Eyre seems to be a little upset, stating she was promised dragons in exchange for her 15,000 men. Rhaenyra claps back and she's like, I mean, you got two. You got dragons. You didn't specify how old they had to be exactly. But Lady Jane argues that obviously they're hatchlings and they're useless for defense currently. They quabble a bit more, but they both agree that they don't like feeling powerless. So I do feel a bit bad for Rhaenyra since she's being forced to negotiate something that's outside of her control. But, I do have hope that she'll navigate it well and be able to figure it out because she's really there with very little instructions other than to just keep Aegon and Viserys safe and then also protect the dragon eggs.
And she has very little bargaining power, too.
Yeah.
I mean, she can't really speak on behalf of Rhaenyra, not in the way that Jace or maybe even Baela could. So she's just kind of like, well, you have to do what you said, and you didn't say it was a big dragon, so... Which, I've had that thought a couple times this season where people are like, Colby, want a dragon for protection, want a dragon for protection. And there's only so many dragons to go around. Also, they need those dragons for battle. And so, on the one hand, I totally get it. But on the other, I feel like all the houses that are Team Black have to know that the dragons are going to be needed for battle. So at some point, the dragons can't just sit there and guard your fucking lands. So, I mean, I get it, but I'm also like, how'd you guys think that was going to go? Are you really surprised?
Yeah, that's true. After this, Rhaenyra is speaking with Mysaria. She discusses how her council yet again disrespects her as they speak around her and not to her. Mysaria says they betray their own smallness, and honestly, she ain't wrong. But Rhaenyra's council honestly feels a little bit like a bunch of chihuahuas. Got a little bark, but they're mostly all bark, but no real bite. So Rhaenyra says, in truth, I cannot fault them. I am now the sovereign. I cannot do as I please, and war has ever been for men to make. She then goes on to complain she was never taught how to strategize for war and that the men around her know it. Mysaria asks if she will send a note to Daemon, but Rhaenyra stubbornly responds, if I must be supplicant to my own husband, what does that make me? I thought that was an interesting quote because, again, we know that Rhaenyra and Daemon are kind of at odds right now. She doesn't really know if she can fully trust him, but she doesn't want to necessarily feel like she needs him in order to be queen, right? She's like, I'm the queen. I'm supposed to be the one who has decision-making power and authority. But, if I have to ask my husband every time to make a decision, does that really leave me in charge? So Rhaenyra reveals she doesn't know what to do because it's entirely new territory, as we discussed a little bit ago. And there's really no example that she can follow and use to advise her decisions. Mysaria goes on to tell her that the people did not view the Dragonhead procession well, referring to the events in King's Landing. The people are worried as their food supply goes short and are anxious with the uncertainty of Aegon's condition. Rhaenyra says, will whispers tear down stone or break shields? And this is when Mysaria tells her not to overlook the power of the people, stating, to the discontented, ill rumors are feed. And then says, what you cannot do, let others do for you. There are other ways to fight a war. And honestly, I love this approach. But I do feel like it really speaks to the difference in how men and women traditionally operate. This isn't meant to be like sexist or anything, but I think women have always understood how to use social emotional intelligence to influence what they want.
Yeah.
They're not out there using their fists to fight. We're spreading rumors in the bathroom between classes, taking down reputations, one piece of gossip at a time.
At least in this universe.
Yeah.
I think men are pretty much trained that the best response is always physical. And because women aren't given that opportunity, they have to find other means to achieve their end. Yeah. So I think that gives Mysaria and Rhaenyra a little bit of an advantage in that regard, but also a disadvantage when it comes to actual physical battle and battle strategy.
Yeah. I do think that this approach is good, though, because it does minimize the loss of life. That's what Rhaenyra wants, right? She has never wanted to enter them into a really bloody battle, and she's avoided using dragons for as long as possible because she knows how destructive they can be. And so I do feel like this is kind of an action that she can take that doesn't require people to necessarily fight with each other, physically speaking. Next, after this, we see a brief scene of Alinda, I believe, Rhaenyra's maid, who's running to the Red Keep at this point. Then next, we have a short scene with Rhaenyra and Baela. Rhaenyra comforts Baela, and they discuss Rhaenys' fierceness and shared love for her. She tells Baela, you are very like her in some ways, and with her gone, I must rely on you, I think. And then this is when she hands Baela a metal box and asks her to give it to Corlys. We, of course, later learn that this is a pin so that she can ask Corlys to be her new hand. Her last words to Baela are, I do not wish to stand alone. After this, we are now back with Daemon at Harrenhal. He's still at Harrenhal. Never left. Maybe he never will. I don't know at this point.
I know. I am starting to wonder if Rhaenyra and Daemon are going to be reunited at all during this season. It kind of feels like no.
Yeah, I really don't know. Maybe at the very end or like the final episode.
Maybe.
If another battle or something takes place and Daemon finally arrives with Harrenhal reinforcements at like the last minute or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's annoying that he's still in this freaking castle. He needs to get out of there.
We've only got 3 episodes left, so...
I know. But Daemon is again having some sort of weird vision. In this vision, or this dream, I should say, a lady with silvery blonde hair is affirming everything he wants to hear and reassuring him of how strong he is and, yada yada. While they get it on in bed, her last words are, "If only you'd been born first, my favorite son." And then you also see Daemon like kind of look back. He's like, "Oh shit, this is not who I thought you were." And you also see that he has like blood-looking substance on his hand again. Mm-hmm. Of course, we as the viewers immediately realize that this is his mother.
Yeah. And collective fandom did the wide-eyed side look like, what? Because at first you're like, ooh, who is that? This is steamy, Yeah. I saw a lot of the speculation based off of the previews was that it was actually a young Aemond and that Daemon had a relationship or at least had sexy time with Aemond. And that's what everyone was thinking. And then they dropped the "you were always my favorite son" line. Everybody was like, what?
Well, it's funny because obviously this show and like within this universe, it's pretty common for like siblings or cousins and stuff to be together, but we draw the line at mother son or like father daughter. We're like, yeah, that's not that far.
You're like, that's kissing cousins we're down with. Okay, we can get behind that, but anything past that, that's too weird.
Cut it off.
We all have to have our line in the sand. And this is ours, okay? Mother and sons, it's a no for us.
Does make me wonder, though, what his relationship with his mother was like. I feel like I had read some info or heard something that says his mother and Viserys' mother, obviously, had died when they were pretty young. I think Daemon was like 4 or something.
I looked it up because I thought it was interesting that Daemon in that scene looked shocked. Like, his eyes go wide and he's like, whoa, what the fuck? Which I appreciate that even Daemon finds the weirdness of that situation.
Yeah.
And so this is going based off of the book. Daemon did not really know his mother. I guess I shouldn't say he never met her. He did, but she died when Daemon was 3 and he was giving birth to his younger brother, Aegon II, who also died several months later. Because then I was like, wait, where's his younger brother? That's why you never see him. So at 3 years old, I'm going to tell you right now, he probably has no memories of her at all.
Right.
And so it's not unreasonable that in a weird witchy voodoo dream sequence, he doesn't recognize his mother.
Yes. Yeah.
So
very weird. But in any case, through the fog of this dream vision thing that he's hearing, Daemon hears Sir Simon asking about his food. And he's brought back to the present where he eats dinner with the Strongs. Daemon looks confused, and we do quickly see Alice was in the room. She looks over at him and then she hustles off, but Simon goes on to inform him of the outcome of Rook's rest. Daemon shares he's gotten Willem Blackwood to get the Brackens in line, and Simon questions whether he'll be able to actually accomplish it in terms of getting them to join forces. And Daemon says all men may be led. 'Tis a matter of showing them whom it behooves them to follow. They go on to have a conversation about the repairs of the castle. Simon starts listing out some stuff and says the bats have made the corridors almost impassable, but the quantity of their... the Daemon just says their shit.
It's just so funny. Harrenhal is such a fucking dump.
It's such a mess.
And I'm like, why would anyone stay there? And then I thought it was so funny that the Freys are like, well, we want Harrenhal. I'm like, have you been there? You sure
Yeah,
about
do you
that?
know?
You sure
Do you
about that?
know?
You sure about that? Because Harrenhal fucking sucks.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that most people don't really know the condition of the castle.
They can't.
Yeah. So Damon was directing them to get more food from another place, and Sir Simon brings up the issue of payment because they don't have any money. He informs him that Laris had transferred all of their money to King's Landing, and really all they have is like a little bit just to keep things going, right? And to keep themselves fed and warm at a bare minimum. Damon ultimately ends up stating, I shall guarantee the payment myself. Which again, I was like,
How? Literally
yeah,
how?
how? And I mean, I don't really necessarily imagine that the blacks have a ton of money either. That's right. I don't really understand how you're going to pull that off, Damon. But, anyways, Damon walks away and Simon says, very well, Your Grace. And then this is when we enter into a little bit of contention. Damon says, you should address me as my king. And Simon is like, but you're the prince. And then Damon's like, what would you call the husband of the queen? And Simon's like, well, I guess the king. And then,
well, he says the king, and Damon cuts him off. And he's like, well, there it is then. And then he says consort, because he is the king's consort. Like when Alicent was married to Viserys, she's the queen consort, right? And it's a little bit of way to distinguish, well, technically, yes, you are married to the king and that makes you queen, or vice versa. You're not the ruler. And then Damon's like, he said that last bit seems unnecessary.
This is unnecessary. Yeah.
He's working for it, man.
I have some thoughts about this later in the next part with Alice. That I feel like kind of further explains the situation. But it is really weird because you still remember like Daemon in season 1, how he bent the knee to Rhaenyra, he put the crown on her head, and even with Viserys, when Viserys makes his final stand to uphold his claim to have Rhaenyra be heir and everything, and he's like struggling on the throne, Daemon goes up and helps him, brother to brother. It's really hard to see Daemon act like this because you're like, who is this? We knew Daemon's had some kind of undercurrent of tension with his family and has had these feelings that, you know, Viserys was not the best ruler and that he should have been ruler, but he's never acted so brazenly on grabbing for power like he's doing currently. It's weird.
Yeah. I think ultimately Daemon is angry at Rhaenyra for the things that happened at Dragonstone. I think there is a little bit of he wants validation from Rhaenyra, and I think he wants her to say, I need you. I can't do this without you. He wants her to make him feel important. And he's angry at her for her kind of dismissing him. And so honestly, I think he's being a little petulant and he's just like, no, I'm the king. I'm also the king. Call me king.
Yeah. You know? that could be true too. So I don't know. But in either case, I'm like, Daemon, get your shit together. Cut this out. What are you doing? So we cut back to King's Landing and Alicent gets an update about Aegon. He's very badly burned with many broken bones, and there's fears of other injuries that they can't see, like internal injuries. Alicent asks if he has awoken, and Orwell replies, I am not sure he will ever wake. Our king's fate lies with the gods now, which is quite ominous. Alicent states they must name a regent to take his place for the time being. Laris agrees with her suggestion, and Tyland asks who she has in mind. Alicent offers herself, since she did it before for Viserys. And what's his name? What's the other council member's name? I already forgot. I looked it up, but then I forgot again.
I always forget. I know Mr. Orwell and Tyland and Aemond.
Yeah.
And it's just that one curly head guy. I can never fucking remember his name.
Same. But he's the one who challenges her, stating that her standing in for Viserys was during a peaceful time. The council suggests the obvious choice is Aemond. And Alicent kind of is like, what the fuck? Aemond is young, and his lack of restraint has already cost us dearly. Orwell does back Alicent, but it's clear she faces the same questioning that Rhaenyra has with her council. Women can't rule and don't understand war. She turns to Laris, who also departs from supporting her and says it had to be Aemond because it wouldn't look good to raise up a woman of their own, having combated Rhaenyra for that very reason. And then she looks to Kristen Cole, and Kristen again agrees that it should be Aemond. He says Aemond is the next in line. It must be him. While he's doing this, he refuses to look at Alicent. I think he knows that this obviously is going to piss her off, but
yeah, we'll talk about this in the next scene when Alicent confronts Cole about what happened.
yeah,
I think Cole is traumatized.
I think so too. Yeah.
I think he is struggling with processing what he saw at Rook's Rest. And I think that is playing a role in why he can't face Alicent. I'm sure he does feel a little guilty. It's very possible that had Rook's Rest not occurred and this conversation was happening, that Cole would have picked Alicent. But because of the element of the dragons, that sways Cole's decision, which we'll discuss in a minute. But I just think there's an element of that trauma at play here.
Yeah. So after this point, Aemond says, it's agreed then, and walks around, plops down in Aegon's seats, and starts taking command and asking questions about where they currently stand and everything. And this is when we pan to Alicent, who is just sitting there smoldering. You hear the rest of the music fade out, and it's very clear we're meant to focus on Alicent and her emotions in that moment. And I mean, it really is kind of the cherry on top for her. She's had everything she believed get turned upside down. She suspects her other son and Cole have turned against her. And now she's been surpassed for being a woman and lost any additional hope of keeping peace at this point. I'd be freaking out if I were her too. But with that being said, the Greens were right. And it does show the hypocrisy of Alicent's claim. You know, their entire game plan for the Greens was to undermine Rhaenyra for being a woman. So, of course, they'd be shooting themselves in the foot if they were to suddenly declare Alicent as regent. And then in Rhaenys's words, Alicent toils in service to men and desires to make a window out of her prison.
Oh, I forgot about that line. What a great fucking line. Yeah.
But I think in Alicent's mind, her primary reason for supporting Aegon was because she believed that was Viserys' wish. But the general strategy of the other Greens and in the council has always been about undermining Rhaenyra because she is a woman. And Alicent was fine with the Greens using this as their primary strategy because at the time, she believed she could still have influence and control. I would imagine this just continues to add to the complexity of Alicent's feelings in this situation because she is now backtracking and trying to regain order and rationality and control, but it's too late because she was complacent in the Greens' actual plan for so long. It's interesting also, I think earlier for a while we're like, Aemond would have been a better choice over Aegon. He has the mind for it. He wants to do it. He takes it seriously. But there is something that's kind of wrong and sour about seeing him just like take over for Aegon. I don't know. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about that?
Sour is a good way to put it. It just feels a little off-putting.
Yes.
I think it feels that way, not because of who Aemond is, but because of the circumstances that led us here, right?
Yes.
The fact that Aemond was even hinted at being involved in Aegon's current condition makes it seem really bad. Basically, he tried to murder his brother so he could be king. I still contest that there's some element of it's a battle with dragons and you're in the sky, and Aemond probably can't even see around Vhagar's big fat head, you know? So there's some question about how all that goes down. But obviously, I strongly allude to the idea that Aemond took some small part in Aegon's physical deterioration. So I think that's what makes it really unsettling, is that you're like, oh, you committed a crime against your brother so you could rule. But realistically, I went back and forth on this actually quite a bit, because on the one hand, Alicent does seem like a logical choice to serve as regent. She did it for many, many years when Viserys was sick. She's got a pretty good political mind, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, the council's not wrong that she did rule during a time of peace. It's very similar to the conversation happening in Rhaenyra's council, right?
Yeah.
And I gotta be honest, I don't necessarily think that Cole is wrong in the follow-up conversation they have in the next scene, where he says, "We've given the word of the dragons, and a dragon rider should lead us." I also don't think that Aemond is necessarily the worst choice for a king. He's not just a dragon rider. He's very well educated. He's been preparing for the role his entire life. And so I don't think it's easy to say that the council made the wrong decision. I really do see the merits to both sides. From the council's perspective, Alicent is still going to be an active serving member of the small council, so she can still offer her opinion on things. She can still participate and lead with experience. She's just not going to be the ultimate decision maker. So I feel a little conflicted. I also did wonder why Cole, as Hand of the King, isn't named regent, because my understanding is the Hand is supposed to act in the king's stead. Remember back in season 1 when they're going to contest who's going to take Driftmark, either Corlys's brother or Luke, Otto was going to sit the throne that day and make the decision.
Right.
And so it's like, why is Cole not leading instead? But then again, Aemond is technically the next heir. So it's a weird situation to navigate. And I could see arguments for a lot of different outcomes.
I think to the point about Alicent's inexperience, we've seen that claim refuted already, though, right? In the sense that, I mean, Aemond is a dragon rider, so I guess that's like the thing for him that puts him above anybody else. He's the one who actually can fly the dragons, knows how to use them, etc. But again, nobody in the Green Council, except for Kristen, has any direct experience with war either, because like Rhaenyra's council, they were on the council during a time of peace too. So that argument is kind of a moot point to me. And so I really do feel like the main thing is just that they just don't want a woman ruling. It's just they can't handle it. That was their biggest thing against Rhaenyra anyway. And so for them to turn around and put a woman on the throne, like it just defeats their whole claim, like the whole reason that they've been doing what they've been doing, right? So I think that's the main thing that I focused on. But
honestly, I agree with you, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. But then it's back to the argument of women are not trained in any battle strategy. They're not educated in that way because that's how this society works. And is that really who you want leading someone who isn't trained in battle strategy? Right?
That's true.
And so it really boils down to that question. Who is the best to lead in a time of war? And by virtue of the way the society is constructed, women just don't have the education or the experience. They're not even allowed to play with swords, right? They play with sewing needles.
Yeah.
And, put on pretty dresses. And that's not their fault. That's not a commentary on their ability. They're just not given the training. Regardless of how you feel about whether women should be trained or not, you want to survive the war with as minimal casualties as possible. And that's the main goal. So it's a very confusing, muddy issue to navigate. And I really do kind of see both sides, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. Because like every time you say something, I'm like, oh yeah, totally. But then I'm like, but also, and then I'm like, oh yeah, like you kind of go back and forth. So I don't know.
I think it's meant to be like that. It's meant to be confusing. Because I think war is confusing, right? You don't really know what the best route is because in either case, you didn't really want war in the first place. So no matter what you do, you're partaking in something that is going to have a very impactful and damaging outcome.
Yeah.
After this, we cut to Hugh and his family. His wife is urging that they must get out since the conditions of the city have worsened. Hugh argues back that no matter where they go, they'll likely be met with dragons. And his wife states, like the one they paraded through the streets, do you think Rhaenyra will let such an affront go unchallenged? And of course, Hugh just doesn't really want to leave. And his wife then states, by all means, stay and wait for his empty promises, husband. With them, you can feed the mouths of ghosts. Obviously, this is just meant to show the city is in shambles. People are starving and really depleted of the resources by this point. And Hugh, whether Aegon meant to lie about the payment to them, I'm not really sure. But in any case, it was probably going to be a while before he got paid anyway. But at this point, the small folk and the townspeople have run out of time. They cannot afford to wait any longer for promises of payment and things like that. And they're getting desperate. So I also felt like the next couple scenes that we've gotten with Hugh in this episode, maybe some foreshadowing that he will become a key player later. I just feel like when we reappear, I was like, oh, okay, now I think it pretty much solidifies the idea that he's going to get involved. So,
yeah, of the side characters, Ulf, Adam Allen, and Hugh, he's showed up the most. I think he's been in almost every episode. I can't remember if we said it last week or not, but he's got that Targaryen silver blonde hair.
Yeah.
I mean, that just screams, I'm a bastard kid of a Targaryen, you know? So he is going to be important. Why else would they keep showing him, you know?
Exactly. So next we see in the town, they've cut down the rat catchers per Aemond's requests at the council. I do appreciate that the dog is still in the show. He's a little legend.
That is the most loyal dog.
He's
probably just been sitting there waiting, and then he follows the body.
Yeah.
They better find that doggy a good home, and they better show us where he is and that he's okay.
Ugh, the goodest boy. But Alicent is speaking to Cole. She meets him outside and she challenges his decision to back Aemond, stating, "You know what he is. Has your loyalty faded, or does it flourish only at night and flee the sunrise like a moth?" Which I thought was really funny. And Kristen Cole basically has like a mini meltdown and shows just how distraught he's been since Rook's rest. He says, "We have given the war to the dragons. A dragon rider should lead us." Alicent doesn't really take this as a good answer and asks, "What of justice, of temperance, or is strength now to be our only god? So you cast me aside." And then Cole says, "Have I not spared you? What we must do now is terrible. Will you preside over it? Is this who you are, Alicent?" And she says, "I did not ask to be spared, and I did not give you leave to speak my name." And then she walks away. I definitely understood Alicent's frustration. I like that she questioned Cole about it. But I think this conversation, again, makes it pretty clear that Cole was very shaken by the events of Rook's rest and seeing all the damage that occurred from the involvement of dragons. It also kind of feels like instead of figuring out maybe how to further prevent such destruction, he's kind of just given up and leaned into it. He's like, all right, well, not much we can do. Might as well equip ourselves with someone who can ride a dragon, if we're going to have dragons involved. But also the undertone, I do think maybe that this was Cole's way of trying to spare Alicent. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. I can't really say. But it's not that he didn't care about Alicent anymore, it feels like. So
I actually have to say, I think this is the most genuine Cole's ever been in any of his scenes. The way he delivers his lines and what he says, he says something to the effect of like, "What I saw in Rook's rest." And she's like, "Well, what did you see?" And he seems absolutely demoralized and in despair. And he says, their armor melted. Men were walking on fire. And I don't think it's that he's just given up and leaned into the dragons. I think he realizes that now that they've been unleashed, they're all powerless against the dragons. There's nothing you can do. It has to be dragon versus dragon. And can you imagine good men that watching armor melt off of their bodies? I mean, that is a very powerful visual. And so I think he's really just kind of in shock. I don't think he was prepared for what he saw. I mean, like conceptually, right? You're like, oh, dragons, fire. Yeah. But actually seeing it in action, I think really fucked him up. And I think he is having a lot of feelings about the role he played in bringing dragons into the conflict. And he is struggling right now. I kind of feel for him, right? Because imagine being the one to start the nuclear war. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of moral implications to that. And what is his culpability in the deaths of those that were killed at Rook's Rest and by the dragons and in future battles too? I think this conversation is evocative of all that inner turmoil he's experiencing.
Yeah, he is definitely scarred from that battle. So after this, we see the common people attempt to flee the city, but also per Aemond's instructions, they close the gates on them. A knight declares to the people who are like, I mean, they're all clamoring to get out of there. They do not want to be stuck in King's Landing. But a knight declares that Aemond made the order as Prince Regent. And you kind of see the people like look around. They're like, who the fuck is Aemond? Who is that? Right. And at this point, they just really don't care. They just want to get the fuck out of that city. They're like, this is not good. We're starving. That's not great for the Greens because the people are certainly going to turn pretty quickly against them, I think. And they already are beginning to. So next, we see Jace on his mission. He's arrived at the Freys castle. After some initial conversation, the Freys disclose that their greatest fear lies in Vhagar. Obviously, Vhagar's a badass dragon, very scary. Nobody wants to face her. And Jace questions their fear, and they say, do you offer us protection? And Jace says, I do, and the protection of my uncle. And they responded, Daemon, I'm sure, has consented to this. And then they do ask, it occurs to us the dragons cannot be in two places at once. This is when they ask for Harrenhal. Again, have you been to Harrenhal?
Why
Clearly
would
not.
anyone want that? Like, what? It would be like someone asking for Chernobyl, you know? Like,
maybe strategically speaking, it's just a good area of land to control because of its location. So I don't think that it's necessarily about the castle itself, although they'll probably be in shock when they see the state of the castle. Strategically, everybody this entire time has been like, Harrenhal is a very important place to have control over. And so I would assume that's probably why they want it. But Jace responds, you want Harrenhal. For that, my mother will want more than your crossing. This is when he says, you're going to have to bend the knee. I think they do, based off of later conversations. It seems like he did secure that alliance. And I'm like, hell yeah, Jace. Look at you making moves, getting armies.
Finally.
I know. I will say that despite him going rogue, he really did have the best interests and intentions of Rhaenyra at heart. And he really has never faltered in his loyalty to her. So I think that's great that even if he was going rogue, he does continuously be like, this is for Rhaenyra. But also this is really excellent for Team Black because it cuts off several weeks of travel time for the Stark army, since now they can cross directly through there. And obviously shortening your travel time is always a good thing. Next, we are again back at Harrenhal. This time, Daemon is helping repair the castle. He's
chopping some wood.
Yeah, he's role-playing Bob the Builder at this point. But as he's chopping some wood, he's hearing some screams in the background, and then he sees Alice up above. Daemon walks in with said wood, and Alice comes in and starts asking him about the Brackens in the Blackwoods. She makes some cryptic comments about hearing words, except she hears it on the wind, quote unquote, and like cries of anguish, children being taken from their mothers, men coming home to find their doors unlatched, their wives carried away. And it's pretty clear, that this is what Wilhelm was doing with the Brackens. We didn't really know previously what his plan was, but he's been terrorizing innocent people, obviously being under Daemon's orders. The other thing is that Alice knows about this, which, again, how the hell do you know this? Like, ain't no way.
Alice is on the wind. She already told us.
She's a witchy barn owl, so duh, that explains why. But Daemon then says war is a terrible thing, and Alice responds, this is not war, these are crimes against the innocent. And she really questions him about his tactics. She's like, is that the kind of army you would raise, men who hate you? She reiterates that once again, in the name of power, it's the weak and the women who must endure. Daemon just says, Aegon is unlike to survive. The realm will suffer if One-Eye Aemond rules. Alice continues to challenge him, asking if his actions have been approved by Rhaenyra. And Daemon states back that the people who support her will only listen to a man who's, quote, better suited for it. The Hightowers with their scheming, or Viserys' first true heir. When I take King's Landing, Rhaenyra is welcome to join me and take her place by my side. King and queen ruling together. I, again, did not like this from Daemon. I really don't like where his motivations are going. Then to continue and finish up their conversation, Alice says, and if you lose, Daemon says, then I'll be dead and none of this will be my problem. The final thing Alice says before she walks off, it's a pity, don't you think, that you never knew your mother? Which again is just a pretty strong link to the fact that she's the one driving these visions and causing everything that Daemon is seeing, hearing, etc. Daemon again looks very disturbed by this because he's like, how the fuck did you know about my mother? Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I still get a weird feeling about Alice. I don't exactly know what she's doing, but I really feel that she has a heavy hand in causing not only Daemon's weird visions and dreams, but also I think in instigating his ideas of grandeur for himself. I think she's forcing all of those things to come up so that he will work through them and finally settle on how he actually feels about everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the question really is just, what is that outcome going to be? Because she can't guarantee that he's going to come out on the other side like a more moral person who is once again faithful and loyal to Rhaenyra. That outcome is not guaranteed. And so I think that's where the tension comes from because we're not really sure. Is Daemon going to defect and just become his own little faction and stand against Rhaenyra, or will he ultimately remain loyal? So
yeah. I've a couple thoughts here. The first is on Alice specifically. I think part of what makes her character so unnerving is we don't know what her motivations are.
Yeah.
She's kind of whimsical and weird and a little witchy, but you don't really know what drives her, what her purpose is. Is she just there to wreak havoc? Is she actually a Team Green supporter and she's fucking with Daemon? I mean, you really don't know.
Right.
The second thing is, I gotta be honest, I do feel the tension of what is Daemon gonna do, but I don't for a second think that he's gonna defect from Rhaenyra. I really don't.
Yeah.
I think Daemon knows that would be suicide for many reasons. One, Rhaenyra would kill him. And two, he can't win. You can't splinter a Daemon faction, a Rhaenyra faction.
Yeah.
Team Green. Daemon's too smart to make that mistake. If anything, I'd be more worried he would be like, yeah, Rhaenyra's the best. And then once they actually won their other throne, then a little oopsie happens and Rhaenyra.
Oh, no, yeah, that's true.
But I think this is just him working through it. I don't like what he said. It's hard to argue for it. But if you really look at it just in a vacuum, he says, Rhaenyra is welcome to join me there and take her place by my side. So obviously the phrasing of welcome to join me implying like, well, that's where I'm supposed to be and she can come and be with me where I'm supposed to be. But he does say that she can take her place by his side. He's not saying that she can be behind him or while he leads. I think he does want them to rule together. So it's not like he's trying to totally circumvent her. But then, of course, the implication is that he's number one and she's a very, very close number two. So it's hard to know where Daemon draws the line in terms of usurping's not the right word.
What he wants the power dynamic to be.
Yes, exactly.
I think he agrees that he definitely wants Rhaenyra there, but it's unclear of whether he's going to let her be queen and he's the second, or if he wants to be maybe the king, so to speak, and Rhaenyra is the queen next to him.
In what capacity overall? Yeah. So ultimately, I think Daemon's going to come around, though. I really do.
I think so too. But I just need it to happen a little bit faster so we can get out of Harrenhal because I'm so tired of these freaking visions. I don't want to watch them anymore. Like, oh, get over it. Just kidding. He has some things he need to work through, but time is of the essence, Daemon. Okay. Anyways. So at the end of this, Alice walks off and Simon interrupts with a message stating the Blackwoods overtook the Brackens and Lord Amos pledged his allegiances to them. Next, we are in Driftmark, very briefly, and we have Baela and Corlys. Baela reminds Corlys of his accomplishments and all that he did for Rhaenys as they discuss the situation. Baela then relays the message. Rhaenyra wants Corlys to serve as her hand. Corlys is annoyed and he says, even the death of my wife will not content her. Has she not asked enough of my house? Baela challenges that it's a great esteem and he could pledge to King's Landing instead if he really wanted to. And Corlys responds, rather, I would sail into the west and be lost. Baela responds, you have done so before at great cost to yourself and those who loved you. Rhaenys was not only your wife, not a thing to be taken from you. She was a Targaryen princess, the queen who never was, and she flew to Rook's Rest of her own will in defense of her kin. And Corlys is just like, and she died. And Baela's words are, she died as she would have wished to die, with honor and dragonfire, the way my mother chose, and the way myself wished to meet my end. Baela goes on to affirm her allegiance to Rhaenyra and seeing her ascend the throne. Corlys then says something interesting. Why now, Corlys? He's like, I would make you my heir. And Baela, I already loved Baela, but I think this conversation in particular really endeared her to me. She says, I am blood and fire. Driftmark must pass to salt and sea. Baela is really just so fierce. She's loyal. She's bold. I kind of feel like Corlys was being a whitey baby. After all this time that you yourself spent trying to maneuver your way around, you've been gone for so much time. And now when it actually counts, you try to back off. I'm like, what the heck? The way to honor your wife, Corlys, is to see that her wishes be granted and to actually fight for Rhaenyra because that's what Rhaenys wanted. You know what I mean?
I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. Like, Corlys was the master of maneuvering in the entire first season. That was all he did. And now when the time comes for him to actually really take a position of power, he's like, ugh, Rhaenyra's mean. I don't like her. You're like, dude, come on.
You were the one pushing for Rhaenyra's son Luke to become the heir of Driftmark and literally pushing out your own grandchildren to do so. But now you want to change your mind. I'm just like, okay, Corlys. But
and now he's like, she'll take everything from me. It's like, what? Like,
there's never been any indication of that. She's offering you this position because she highly respects you. It's literally because she recognizes how experienced and how helpful you would be. That's an opinion of reverence for him. And also as a way to honor Rhaenys still too, is to involve Corlys and everything. But aside from that, obviously it would be a huge asset if Corlys becomes Rhaenyra's hand. He's got money. He's got a strong naval force. He's very experienced in war and also well respected for his ability to strategize and maneuver as well. So hopefully he says yes.
I think he will, but we'll see.
I think so too. After this, we have Rhaenyra and Alfred. She's having a private conversation with him, and she admits that she shouldn't have waited for Daemon to make moves. So she has decided to send him to Harrenhal to go do a wellness check, I guess. And he asks, are you removing me from your council? And she reminds him of his family's loyalty to Viserys and that she knows he would never accept the Hightower claim. She says, we cannot challenge King's Landing without the Riverlands, but I will not send a message by Raven for Daemon to disregard. I ask you to reason with him, find out his state of mind and his intentions. Alfred's a little bit like, intentions? What do you mean by that? And she flat out says whether he means to raise a host for me or for himself. He says he would not dare. And Rhaenyra says, have you known Daemon to lack in daring? Go now with haste. I think it's really funny how spot on Rhaenyra's suspicions are about Daemon and his shenanigans.
I know. I like when she says, have you ever known him to not be daring? I'm like, yep.
Right.
She knows him really fucking well.
Spot on. But I also don't believe Rhaenyra gives herself enough credit in her knowledge. She may not have been trained in war, but she was in those council meetings with Viserys, learning how the political game works and learning how to strategize with as little bloodshed as possible. And that's hugely important. So I think it's a huge win for Viserys because as we see this war unfold, you really do get a lot of appreciation for the way Viserys ruled in hindsight. He was really ahead of his time and pretty wise. And I think Rhaenyra is also to the credit of his raising of her. She's really self-aware. She's humble. She's thoughtful. Despite Alfred stepping out of line, I think that really speaks volume for her style of leadership as well. So,
yeah, I agree.
All right, we're back in Harrenhal for another brief period of time. Daemon continues having some weird visions and he's hearing some sounds, and Sir Simon interrupts him again. Daemon says, "What is it, Sir Simon? Is the pudding now served?" He's like so sassy to Simon. And I'm like, bruh, you're living in this man's castle. Yeah, be nice to him. But Simon informs him the River Lords have come and they want to speak with him. So this is now where he walks to that main gathering hall. And the River Lords and the ladies go on to protest what the Blackwoods have done in destroying farmlands, terrorizing the peasants, women, and children with zero honor or basic common decency. They say punishing Bracken for his own treason is one thing, but the Blackwoods have exploited the war for the crown to visit atrocities upon their old rivals. It's clear that Daemon has a problem when they state they carried out these atrocities in the name of House Targaryen, waving the red and black dragon banner. And I was like, oh shit, Daemon, you in trouble.
You're gonna get out of that one.
I know. You also see Simon just giving him like such a mean side eye on the side.
Yes.
He's like, what did you do? I don't think Daemon knew what the Blackwoods were actually going to do, but regardless, well, he gave him free reign. But I think it's implied that he's like, do some bad shit. I don't think he knew exactly play for play what they were going to do. But regardless, Daemon recognizes that in times of war, bad things are going to happen. However, even if that's true, it's definitely not what the River Lords wanted to hear from someone they're potentially pledging allegiance to. And then Daemon starts to look kind of confused again. And this is when Laena appears in a vision. And she says, a terrible war is being fought in these lands. Have you look after our girls? Again, somebody's just there to remind him of his past and his duties and his obligations. And the River Lords go on to state they shouldn't have trusted a man who killed a child.
Yup.
Oh, there's the tea. Daemon tries to deny any involvement, but they go on to state the Riverlands are an ancient place, watched closely by the eyes of old gods and new. And dragon or no, we shall not raise our banners for a tyrant. And then they all scurry off. We see Daemon is just really thrown off. He's having these weird visions again. So he's just not in a great state to really process anything. It just kind of leaves it at that. And we next cut to a very brief scene with Rhaenyra. She appears to be struggling to sleep. Then we cut to King's Landing, where we see Rhaenyra and Mysaria's little spy, Melinda, make her way into King's Landing. She consults the King's Guard, stating she has an errand from Lady Mysaria. And then she goes on to knock on a door, and we see a former maid. I believe that this is the one who Alicent dismissed. I forgot her name.
Diana.
Diana, yes. And obviously we don't know what she tells her yet. Mm-hmm. Well, we can imply what it might potentially be about, but
yeah. Diana is the maid that Aegon sexually assaulted in season 1.
Yes. But also it's interesting that Mysaria still seems to have quite a bit of influence with people in the city, despite not being there anymore. So, I mean, that's definitely helpful for Rhaenyra at the bare minimum. So next we cut to Corlys. He's considering what Rhaenyra has asked of him. And then also is having a moment of reflection, and he's standing in front of the Iron Throne. Helena comes up with him and asks, was it worth the price? Obviously, this is pretty heavy language. I think she's referring to a couple things. She's referring to the loss of his eye to get Vhagar previously, but obviously also referring to what he presumably did to Aegon as well. I'm not sure if Helena really knows the details, but it seems like she can sense that Aemond did something.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think a lot of Helena's lines are meant to have a lot of double meaning. Like a few episodes ago when she tells Alicent, I forgive you. You can go a lot of directions with that. And I think very similar in this scene as well. I think it's meant to be reflective of the character's overall journey. So I think it's very telling that's what she's asking him, because I do wonder in that moment if Aemond is thinking about it, if he is wondering, is it worth it? I kind of think he's thinking yes, but, time for reflection.
Yeah. We next see Alicent, who's sitting with Aegon. He's struggling to breathe, and Alicent just touches his face. And then as she walks away, we hear him say, Mummy. Like he just mumbles it under breath.
Oh, my heart.
I know, it was really so sad. I did think it was a little bit funny, though, because he kind of looks like a mummy, and then he's asking for money.
Lorraine! You can't say that. That's mean.
I do feel really bad for him, though. Like, he's in awful condition, and I actually really don't want Aegon to die, because I feel like that'd be horrible. But anyways, sorry.
Wrong with you. God, we're going to have a little chat after this episode.
Okay. So we have reached our final scene of the episode. Rhaenyra and Jace are having a little heart-to-heart again. It's clear that she's pissed at him, but she does eventually ask about what happened with the Freys. Jace fills her in on the bargain he was able to make. And she does say, "I'm proud of you, Jace. You've done our cause a great service." Although she says this like very quipped. It's kind of like, I don't want to tell you this because I'm mad at you, but you did a good job. And Jace is like, "Why do you look so angry then?" And Rhaenyra reveals, "You chafed at being prevented from action. Imagine my lot. I'm a dragon rider as well, with war being fought over my ascension, and yet I must wait here, always prudent, sending others to fight and be felled in my name. Even you've managed to do your part." And Jace says, "You are my queen. No harm can come to you." And Rhaenyra says, "You are my son, and I did not give you leave to go." Jace continues to challenge why he can't do anything and shouldn't leave Baela to bear the burden alone. Rhaenyra states his dragon is young and wouldn't stand a chance against Vhagar. She also goes on to express her anxiousness at her inability to fight and also their lack of dragons. Jace brings up Vermithor and Silverwing, who are two of the next largest dragons that are currently riderless. And he also brings up the fact that they have family members who share their blood. Then, they start scheming a little bit. And Rhaenyra says a dragon will only accept a dragon lord to ride it, or so say the histories. And Jace says Valyrian history is written to gild us in glory. Then she's like, "Are you suggesting we put a Malister on a dragon or a Tully?" Jace just says it's better than defeat. This is when they look over to their records and their lineage, and she says it's a mad thought. Ooh.
Yes, it is. So on the one hand, sure, this is a great idea. Maybe they'll find someone to ride Silverwing and Vermithor, and then they'll have a chance at defeating Vhagar. Even if they get someone to actually bond the dragon and be able to ride it, it's still a bad fucking idea. They won't know how to ride. They're not going to know how to battle in a dragon, and they don't have the time to teach them. So best case, you have a warm body to sit on the dragon and hopefully not die, okay? Secondly, I'm going to draw a parallel to the actual world we live in. Nuclear weapons are dangerous, right? What are dragons if not nuclear weapons in this world? They are the absolute worst weapon. They represent destruction, death, fire. When you open the door for other people to have access to dragons, and you prove the concept that it can be done, what's to stop everyone from doing it? The reasons the Targaryens have been able to maintain their absolute supremacy and power and have gone so long uncontested is because of their dragons. Who can stand against them? Even an army of all of Westeros couldn't stand against one dragon. That dragon would just fly in the sky and flame everybody, let alone multiple dragons. So if you open the door, you would allow proliferation of basically nuclear weapons, aka dragons. You've now allowed a world in which people feel they can challenge with their own dragon. And you've also created this environment where people will quite literally kill to find potential children or people that have Targaryen blood. They'll start bargaining for marriages, or even worse, they'll start sexually assaulting to get heirs to potentially ride a dragon. Like, you'll create this sort of mentality that they just need to keep breeding more and more potential people that can bond dragons. And it just, regardless of whether Team Green or Team Black wins, you do not want a world in which more than one house has control of any dragons. Like, in the short term, I think it's great. Sure, they'll defeat Vhagar, but in the long term, it's bad for the longevity of House Targaryen and their ability to hold the throne. If you start letting Tullys, Mallisters, Starks, whoever start having dragons, I think it's bad.
Yeah, this is why they're going to have to tread very carefully. And they have to be very selective about who they actually choose. Because I do agree, at best, I think they need to find somebody who follows either maybe the Valyrian lineage or the Targaryen lineage. Because in order to bond a dragon, you have to be of Valyrian descent, right? That's what the Targaryens and the Valyrians have in common in their ability to do so. And although I'm sure there's been mixings into other lineages, it's not quite as strong as it would be if it was a bastard child from Targaryen or the Valyrians. And I agree with you that it does really open the door if other people start seeing, oh, if we can find bastard children who have this lineage and descend from Valyrians, then we may be able to do that. Although I will say that's not necessarily true either, because like you pointed out, they do need to be trained in how to actually get the dragon, ride the dragon, have control over the dragon. And only the Targaryens and the Valyrians know how to do that. So that is sort of the limiting factor in the idea that just anybody who has the blood is going to be able to get a dragon, right? It could create a little bit of an arms race currently between Team Green or Team Black if Team Green were to figure this out as well. Maybe they will if they see Team Black doing it too. But I do agree that going down this path is good because it gets them more riders and more dragons to combat Vhagar, because that's really the main goal, right? Is that they just need to get rid of Vhagar.
If to be clear, if they eliminate Vhagar, it's over for Team Green.
Yes.
Because Team Black has way more dragons. They'll just roll up in all their dragons and everyone will just have to be burned or bend the knee. It's really all about Vhagar.
But basically, there's only really a couple dragons that they're trying to get. I don't know how many ultimately they're going to gain through this process of trying to find new people, but the ones that they definitely mentioned were Vermithor and Silverwing.
And probably Sea Smoke.
Yeah, maybe Sea Smoke, which I am a little bit confused. We talked about this previously, but because Laenor's not actually dead, I do wonder how that's going to work. But anyways, we have 4 potential candidates currently that we've met that could become writers. And that's Hugh, Adam and Alan, and then right? I think those are the 4 people that we've been exposed to who are, quote, dragon seeds.
It's only been confirmed that Ulf is a descendant and Alan. We know Adam and Alan are brothers, but they could just be on the mom's side. It's presumed not. But I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's very obvious.
Yeah, the implication is 4 potential players, and we'll see if all 4 of them actually end up bonding dragons. But yeah, anyways, it is, as Rhaenyra stated, a mad thought. But if they pull it off and manage to control it, then it would also be highly beneficial to them. So we'll see.
It's a batshit crazy idea. For sure.
Yes. All right. So that wraps up the analysis portion. We do have our fantasy court of law and our favorite moments to cover. So let's take it to the courtroom. Where do we currently stand?
So I think as I'm looking at my list, this episode is a definitive win for Team Black in a lot of ways. There are 2 positive things for Team Green. The first is that Aemond has been declared regent. This is presumably going to have a stabilizing effect on the realm. As we know, Aegon was not the best king in terms of strategy, and Aemond seems a lot more prepared in terms of what's the actual situation, what's going on now, but also just his whole life. He's been a little bit more diligent about his preparations for this moment. I mean, he's calm, cool, collected, ready to lead. He has Vhagar. So I think that is probably a good thing for Team Green, actually.
Yes.
Especially in terms of battle. We know that Aemond was part of the Shadow Council with Cole and they've been strategizing the entire time. So probably a good thing for Team Green. The second thing is Daemon has greatly, greatly angered the River Lords, as is evident in his scene where they were like, we'll never bend the knee for you. You're a spineless, evil person. Tyrant, yes. And that's good for Team Green because, as we discussed this entire season thus far, control of the Riverlands is super important. And taking their women and children, or at bare minimum, condoning it, looks really bad for Daemon. And I don't know how he's going to get around that because we've already proven that Brackens are like, we're not going to bend the knee, just burn us instead. And it stands to reason that the other houses in the Riverlands will do the same thing. So that is a win for Team Green that Daemon has fucked it up for them, because it makes them, not only will they not bend the knee for Team Black, but it makes them more likely to turn to Team Green.
Right. Also, the fact that Jace went ahead and promised Harrenhal to the Freys.
Oh,
and Daemon doesn't know about that yet.
Oh, and the Strongs probably won't really like that. Simon Strong probably won't really. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Ooh.
But also, I mean, is Daemon really, after going through all of that effort to try to get Harrenhal, you really think he's just going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll give it to the Freys?
It's meant after the war is over, so they don't really need Harrenhal. But
I guess. Yeah, that's true. But anyways, in either case, Harrenhal in general is a point of contention because it's not solidly under Team Black's control and the Riverlands in general. So,
yeah. That's all I had for Team Green.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have anything to add either. Those were my notes too.
Okay, perfect. So for Team Black, we've got several different things. The first is the blockade is still in effect and it's really becoming very effective. There's several scenes in this episode that's indicative of that. People are angry. They want to leave King's Landing. They're literally shouting, we want meat. The cut of like looking at produce, all the food's rotted. The scene with Hugh and his wife. People are scared, and now people are starting to panic. You couple that with the second point is that Cole made a huge miscalculation by parading Maylee's head around. So now you've created this situation where they see a dragon that's dead. They know that Rhaenyra is going to want answer for that. And it's an ill omen. On top of that, they're now starving. So you've created this really toxic environment that is just a powder keg of angry mob energy, right? And that is not good. Not good to have to deal with that. So all that is good for Team Black. I think in the scene with Mysaria and Rhaenyra, that's represented in the way Mysaria presents her argument to Rhaenyra that there are more than one way to fight a war and the people are not happy, and use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
Next, Aegon is very close to death. That is good for Team Black. Any green that dies, especially the king, is going to be seen as a win for them. Again, we don't know Aegon's fate, but regardless, the fact that he cannot rule has created instability in Team Green, and they could use that to hopefully manipulate and change some minds for people that may have declared for Team Green. Because the uncertainty of Aegon's fate and Aemond as ruler could kind of turn some people. The next one for Team Black is that Daemon has secured the Brackens, albeit gruesome methods, but they have pledged their swords to him. Whether they'll stick to that, who knows? But as of this episode, he technically has the Brackens and the Blackwoods now raising their banners for him. Next is Jace makes a deal with the Freys. This is obviously hugely beneficial. This is probably the biggest win for them. Not only does he guarantee passage across the twins, but in doing so, he has allowed Craig and Stark's Greybeards to hopefully intercept the Lannisters before they make their way to the Riverlands. So that's a very strategic military advantage that they have. Not to mention, he also got them to bend the knee to Rhaenyra, which is also good. And it's not said how many bannermen the Freys have, but it's fair to say that they have a notable amount. Then, last but not least, although I think this is a terrible idea, it is technically a win for Team Black. Jace and Rhaenyra's crazy idea to get a rider for Silverwing and Vermithor. Who knows if it'll actually work? I'm sure it probably will in some form or fashion, maybe not to the extent they hope, but the fact that they even have an idea to get more dragons into play, especially older, bigger dragons that can actually contend with Vhagar, that's also going to be a win for Team Black. Now, we'll see how long it takes them to be successful in getting a rider on the back of either one of those dragons. But that is also a strategically good position for Team Black to be in.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was all I had for Team Black. I mean, that was a lot, actually. I feel like they're on the precipice of being in this really strategic and successful position. They just need a lot of pieces to slide into place, and I think the tides may turn a little bit.
My only thing to add for Team Black is that getting Corlys as hand is a huge advantage.
If he agrees, yes.
If he agrees, yeah. It seems likely that he will, but obviously with his experience, his military force on his own, he would be a huge asset for them. So,
absolutely.
All right. That wraps up our trial in Fantasy Court of Law. Last, we just have our favorite moments to share. So, Addison, what were your favorite moments from this episode?
So, I really like that whole scene with Daemon and the Brackens when he's on his dragon and he says, "The hour is late. My dragon is hungry. You have no choice but to submit." Honestly,
yeah.
I mean, I don't want to rehash the whole scene, but really everything in that scene. It's like the Brackens responds. And then specifically the part where Lord Bracken turns around and you see Caraxes' head behind him. That's just such a freaking cool scene. It reminds me of when Aemond bonded Vhagar. It's just really cool. And then immediately next scene where Daemon's sitting on the rock and he's like, God damn. He's like, I didn't think they would be so eager to die.
I know, yeah.
He's like, shit, that really put a wrench in my plans. But I just thought that was really funny. And then I like when Aemond takes over and the last line, just the way he delivers it, he says, and someone cut down the fucking rat catchers. And you're like, yeah. It was just funny the way he delivered it. And then I thought it was really funny in the scene where Daemon and Sir Simon, they're having dinner and they had that little argument about call me king, not my prince or whatever. And when Daemon stands, it's a very quick scene. Sir Simon looks at the people in his little group sitting and he's like, stand up, you know, because when the king stands you have to stand, and they're just like, and they're like still like trying to shove food into their mouth and he's like, get up. It's just kind of goofy. I love Sir Simon. Any scene he's in, I'm happy. He's great.
Yes,
he is easily my favorite side character. He's just,
I think so too. He's just a very fun presence.
He is. He really is. The actor does a really good job. And then my last favorite moment is, well, this one's really sad, but when Alicent is with Aegon and then when she walks away, he says, Mommy.
Oh, I know.
So sad. It's so sweet and heartbreaking.
For Aegon.
I know, but yeah, those are my favorite moments.
All of her kids just want love from her, basically, is at the core of their issue.
I know. What were your favorite moments?
I really liked the Bracken scene as well. To find Daemon dumbstruck is always funny because it seems like he's always like, no, I know what's going on. And then for him to just be totally confused and thrown off. It's just funny to see. I also liked when Rhaenyra speaks with Mysaria and Mysaria says, to the discontented, ill rumors are feed. And then what you cannot do, let others do for you. There are other ways to fight a war. It feels like Mysaria is probably going to play a little bit more of a role now with Rhaenyra because it seems like she's been seeking advice from other females as well, or like people that can relate to her experience a little bit. But I think Mysaria makes a good point. So I like that they've formed a little bit of that plan to take advantage and hopefully gain some favor with the small folk in King's Landing. I really liked when Baela, she's speaking to Corlys and she says, I am blood and fire. Driftmark must pass to salt and sea.
Yeah, that's a good line. The way she delivers it is good too.
Yes. Yeah. She's just loyal and she's very fierce, but I think she understands she didn't really grow up in Driftmark anymore. And it's not really her home to claim. So then after that, I liked when Daemon is like sitting in bed, he's having weird visions again, and Sir Simon comes to interrupt him. He's like, what is it, Sir Simon? Is the pudding toaster? It's just so mean. But it's funny because Simon always is eating, you know? Like
he's a big boy. He likes to eat.
Yeah. He just wants to be comfy and eat his nice meals. So
exactly.
And those were my favorite moments.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. All right. So that wraps up our episode for today. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of the Book Dumb Fantasy podcast. If you would like to keep up with us on other platforms, then all of our socials are linked below in the episode description. That is all that we have for you guys today. Stay nerdy, everyone, and we'll catch you all next week for House of Dragon Season 2, Episode 6. Bye.
Bye.
So that is all for housekeeping.
No burping, Kelso.
Oh my gosh, I know he's so close. Lay down. Hey, go.
I can hear him just in the background, like, all dogs are mouth breathers. Yeah, why is the gain turned up so loud? What the fuck? I just changed it last night.
Your kids must have snuck in.
They weren't even here. I'm telling you, there's a fucking ghost in this house. Record scratch. Dang it. When you try to be funny, now I can't do it. Conversation is evocative of all of that inner turmoil. Oh my gosh. All of that inner turmoil.
Atrocities are bad things are gonna happen. Atrocities. Bad things.